Hello, my name is Brian Lawrence. I'm a planner with the county, and I'd like to introduce to you Reimagining Our Westmoreland, the county's blueprint for a more livable and prosperous county. Our county is facing some serious issues related to demographics. As planners, we use population statistics to uncover the trajectory of our communities. In the county's case, we're facing an aging and declining population. But first, I hope to inform you about the process by which we've arrived at this point. In 2012, the County Planning Department completed a community profile. This report collected, charted, and mapped over 3 dozen data sets related to population, housing, and economics. One of the most concerning points was our rapidly aging population and the lack of a younger generation to backfill the population. Additionally, about a year later, we were cited in a national online publication called CityLab as one of the bottom 10 counties in the country in terms of employment change. Also, our partners in the Industrial Development Corporation and Economic Growth Connection were hearing from employers about the difficulty they were having in filling jobs. All of this led to a meeting convened by the Community Foundation of Westmoreland County. At this meeting in October 2014, the Community Foundation gathered government, business, nonprofit, and educational leaders to talk about our shared recognition of this problem. A subcommittee was formed, and we got started on collecting more data and research. By March of 2015, a problem statement was formulated to clearly set out a direction to address these changes. Now, it's also appropriate to recognize the great things about Westmoreland County. We're the second largest county in the region, which is great because a large population base means more customers for goods and services, which helps boost business activity. We have access to a major city, and while none of us like the Squirrel Hill tunnels, being as close to Pittsburgh as we are is a major asset. Third, one of our county's longtime strengths has been our natural resources, whether that's in water, land, agriculture, coal, or now natural gas. We also have abundant natural beauty and recreation. The Great Allegheny Passage is one of the most visited tourist attractions in the area, and we have the Laurel Highlands. Lastly, low taxes, low crime, and quality schools have been major assets for nearly every community in the county. What I'd like to do now is inform you about what is happening in our population and how those changes are likely to affect our communities and our quality of life in the future. I'll do this by sharing a few charts and graphs. Then I'll follow up with some findings from the subcommittee. Finally, I'll share with you our thoughts on what must be done to address this. What we're looking at is a population pyramid in 2010. It divvies up the population into 5-year age cohorts and charts their contribution to the whole. On the left axis, you'll see the age cohorts, and on the bottom you see the percent of the population they represent. Communities use a graph like this to uncover patterns and predict possible changes in their age makeup. The first pattern we'll see is the large group between the ages of 40 to 64. Each 5-year cohort in this group is larger than any other cohort. In fact, these 5 cohorts alone make up almost 40% of the population. This is the baby boomer generation, and they're on their way to retirement. So what do you think this pyramid will look like in 10 years, when the 40-year-olds are 50 and the 64-year-olds are 74? The second pattern we'll examine is the relative lack of folks in the 20 to 39 set. These are the folks who are getting ready to get married and have kids and fill in the jobs left open by those retiring in the next 10 years. But there are a lot fewer of them relative to the expected number of people to retire. We also know that they're getting married way later than previous generations, and that they're having fewer children. So what does this pattern suggest? The last pattern we'll examine is the under 20 group. These are mostly school-aged children. Can you see how each successive age cohort is smaller than the one above it? Does that suggest growth or decline in the school-aged child population? All 3 of these patterns converge to drive up our median age. In 2000, the median age of the county was 40. By 2010, it was 45. And by 2020, it may go as high as 51. For some perspective, the median age of the U.S. was 37 in 2010. So while there are national trends being played out in Westmoreland County, we are the oldest in the 10-county region and the 7th oldest county in the state. What does all this mean for our workforce? Our county's workforce has traditionally been a major asset when employers are looking to move here or expand operations. But given these trends, there is a real cause for concern. The chart here consolidates the 19 age cohorts in the previous chart into just 3. School-age children, those under 20, those who are the traditional workforce, aged 20 to 64, and those who are over 65, the assumed retirement age. But this chart also looks at how things have changed between 2000 in yellow and 2010 in green, and what is likely to occur by 2020 by way of a projection in blue. To summarize the chart, between 2000 and 2020, we can expect to see a 15% decline in school-age children. What kind of impact will that have on our primary and secondary education systems? We're also likely to see a 4% decline in the workforce. And while 4% doesn't seem like a lot, that's 4% of 150,000 people. So that's upwards of 6,000 people leaving the workforce. How will employers respond to this? Lastly, the retired age population may see an increase by as much as 56% between 2000 and 2020, where 1 in 5 people were over 65 in 2000. Almost 1 in 3 will be over 65 in 2020. What kind of strain will that put on aging services? We're not only aging, we're losing population of about 1,000 people on an annual basis. So why are we losing population? Population change is merely the combination of 2 factors, births minus deaths, and net migration. The chart here shows those factors between 2001 and 2015. Deaths are shown in red, births are shown in blue, net migration in green, and net change in orange. You'll note that the left axis goes from 5,000 to negative 2,500 at the bottom. For the past 15 years, deaths have outpaced births by a margin of 4 to 3. So for every 4 people dying, only 3 were born in the county. And we expect that margin to increase dramatically in the next 2 decades. Knowing that our largest age groups are 40 to 64, it's likely that the death rate will increase. We also know that folks are getting married later and having fewer children, which will push down the birth rate substantially. Additionally, our net migration rate has remained fairly constant, dipping negative and positive. And in that time, we've added a total of 3,000 residents, or about 200 per year. But the difference between births and deaths squelches out those gains, yielding an annual loss of about 1,000 per year. Now, while there's little we can do about the death rate, and there's little we can do about the birth rate, the one thing we can change is that green line. We can work to retain and attract younger folks to Westmoreland County. So what does such a change look like? The following chart shows what population growth has looked like between 2000 and 2014. Nearly 50 million people joined the U.S. population, but they certainly didn't look like Westmoreland County. Hispanics made up 35% of that growth, Asians 11%, blacks were 10%, those of 2 or more races were 5%, and whites made up the remaining 40%. So the chances are that if we attracted another 1,000 people in the next year, there's a 60% chance that they wouldn't be white. Now, let's compare that to the county's racial makeup. A full 97% of our population is white, while 2% is black and 1% is Asian. While there's nothing inherently wrong with this, we have to ask, will it affect our ability to attract a younger, more diverse generation of Americans? Let's bring this to a conclusion with some findings based on the data. To summarize, we can expect a possible increase of 56% in retirees, a 4% decline in workforce, and a 15% decline in school-aged children. There may be a skills drain in the workforce. The folks who are leaving the workforce are likely the most skilled, most senior, and most trained. If employers can't fill jobs, they're likely to leave the county or close. What does all of this predict for county services for an aging population? Will demand for such services increase? Can we expect an oversupply of housing? A recent article in CityLab asks the question, what will happen to Grandma's house when no one wants to buy it? It's somewhat likely that it needs updates to keep up with the market. Does the younger generation want that type of housing? Can they afford it? Transportation will become a bigger issue as more retired folks lose the will or capacity to drive. And we know that losing a license is one of the biggest factors driving the social isolation that leads to further decay in elder health. The committee work also identified parochialism and provincialism as major hindrances to solving this issue. It really is a regional problem that deserves regional solutions. But if we're all working in silos, or at worst, at cross purposes, we aren't going to solve this problem. We have to ask what kinds of communities will retain and attract the next generation of residents. What do they look like? What kinds of housing options are available? What amenities do the younger generations want? What other societal ills can accompany this decline? We've seen communities across the country ravaged by opioid abuse. Will that get worse or better? The committee summarized the problem into one clear, concise problem statement. That is, having a homogeneous population with an absence of a younger demographic diminishes Westmoreland County's status as a premier county in the region in which to live, work, and play. To address the problem, our singular goal must be to attract, develop, and retain a diverse and stable workforce that will sustain a healthy economy. And this is where we can use your help. By attending workshops, responding to the online survey, using our map-based outreach tool, and communicating these issues to friends and family members, we can begin to solve this problem. And while we recognize it didn't occur overnight, so too our solutions will not come to us overnight. This is a long-term process of reimagining our Westmoreland. Thank you for your participation thus far, and we hope to keep you engaged over the coming months and years.